book that he recently read about someone's fight for their life. Please welcome Trevor Sebastian.
Thank you so much, Roman. So I think a really good thing about reading a lot of books is that if you ever need to do an impromptu speech, you have something to talk about. So always remember that. A book that I want to talk about that I recently read is, I know the words are going to be a little jumbled, but it's called A Knock at Midnight. And this book had me thinking a lot. And so I'm really excited to share it with you all today. Oh, sorry. My speech is 4 to 6 minutes. So to share this book with you guys today, the book is about someone who went to prison and they had to fight for their life in order to get out. And when I was reading this book, I realized that my life has been pretty good. My childhood was great. I have wonderful parents. They had plenty of money. They put me in lots of extracurricular activities. I learned karate. I did baseball. I've had no problems being able to go to school and afford it. It's been a pretty good life. But I realize now, as I get older, there's a lot of people whose life isn't that great. In fact, sometimes it's really difficult for them to even just survive day to day. And the person that I read about was Sharanda Jones was her name. And she was someone who was struggling. All of her life, she grew up in poverty. She struggled deeply to have enough money just to feed herself. And at one point she had a kid. So now not only was she trying to provide for herself, she had to provide for her daughter as well. And like many people who are in poverty and struggle very hard in order to just get ahead, she made some bad choices. And that's what a lot of us do, right? We have some good choices in our life, and we also have some bad choices. And we make those bad choices, we have to deal with the consequences. And sometimes those consequences aren't great, but sometimes they can be great. They can be life-changing. The one choice that Sharanda Jones had was that she decided to sell crack cocaine. She realized that it was one of the only ways that she can get ahead, was to sell drugs. And so that's what she did. It was for a very short period of time. From what I remember, it was about 1 year. She sold drugs, not very much of it, just enough so that she can get enough money to open up a restaurant so that she could sell the food that she loved to make to the people around her. And what's so interesting about this is that at one point she got a knock on her door, and it was the police. They took her in for questioning. And after a lot of talking, a lot of interrogation, they ended up putting her in jail, and she ended up going to court and on trial for, and I want to really emphasize this, for a conspiracy to distribute. So they found no drugs on her, but because someone else said that she sold drugs, and she did at one point, she was convicted for conspiracy to sell crack cocaine. So pretty interesting already there. She wasn't actually found with any drugs on her. And I want you all to take a moment and just think, how many years do you think she got for conspiracy to sell crack cocaine? 5 years? 10 years? 20 years? No, she got life in prison. Life in prison for selling crack cocaine, and she didn't even have it on her. And what's so interesting about this book is that she's not the only person. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of people who, because of our horrible laws and because of the previous war on drugs, people who needed help, people who were struggling to survive in their daily lives, and even people who were addicted to these drugs, people who really didn't need to go to prison. They needed to go to a therapist. They end up going to jail for a very long time. And that's what happened to Sharanda Jones. She went in life for prison, and for her, all she could think about was that she would never see her daughter graduate from college. She'd never see her daughter have kids. She'd have to see, or she'd have to experience all of these life moments that she was hoping to as a mother from behind prison doors. And that's really unfortunate. I think about it and I realize that my life is pretty nice. I don't have to worry about these things. I never had to deal with these experiences, but Sharanda did. She had to deal with a bad choice that cost her essentially her life. Now, to leave you with at least some good news is that the book is not specifically about her. It's actually about her lawyer, Her name is Brittany Barnett. She realized that there were so many people who were being convicted for these types of crimes and facing life in prison that she had to fight back. And after lots of years of work and a lot of trial and error, she was able to free at least 3 to 4 other people who were convicted for life in prison for drug offenses. And then the sad thing, though, is that the only way she was able to get them free from a life in prison to save their lives was to get clemency from the President of the United States. She was very lucky that President Obama was in office, and he made it a point to try and release people for nonviolent drug offenses. And I believe, if I remember correctly, he ended up giving clemency to, I believe, 1,000 to 2,000 people, somewhere around that range, which, if you think about it, seems like a lot of people. But you look at how many people are in prison for drug-related nonviolent offenses, it's a drop in the bucket. And so regardless of what your opinion is on drugs or the war on drugs or the criminality of drugs, I think that we can all empathize with someone like Sharanda Jones, who made a bad choice, who did something that probably wasn't in her best interest, but she had to pay the ultimate price. For a long time, she thought that she had to spend an entire life in prison. And in the end, she ended up spending 12 years of her life in prison. But at least now she's free, and now she's sharing her story. So I recommend that if you have a moment to check it out. It's a pretty interesting experience to think about. And with that, I want to end my speech. Thank you so much.